They rolled their eyes when she walked in, too young, too soft-spoken, too polished to belong in a war room of hardened officers. She took her seat quietly, offered no protest when mistaken for an aide. One even joked she was there to fetch coffee. But when the briefing began and the colonel deferred to her, silence fell. She stood, opened the file, and introduced herself not with attitude, but authority. Captain Alara Mendez, Joint Tactical Lead. And just like that, the room remembered what real command sounds like. The hall smelled like coffee, dust, and paper. Not the romantic kind of paper, but the thick, overhandled sort orders. Rosters, decrypted reports marked eyes only in fading ink. The Defense Coordination Annex in Sector 8 hadn't been renovated in decades. Its walls were gray with paint that absorbed ambition. The men and women inside it were older than the buildings they briefed in. And yet, when Alara Mendez entered, she looked like a misplacement. Young. That was the first thing most noticed. No scars on her hands, no sun-faded fatigues, no gravel in her voice. Her uniform was pressed so crisply it offended a few veterans. No limp, no eye patch, no stories told in gestures. Just posture upright, silent, respectful. She didn't command the room. She waited for it to notice her. It didn't. Not at first. The operation was classified, but the whisper round. The brass was clear. Troop morale was fraying along the border, and the patrol units hadn't adapted to the new terrain algorithms. Coordination failures, delayed reinforcements, supply routes compromised. They needed someone to fix the fracture, someone young enough to understand the technology, but disciplined enough to work within chain of command. They didn't expect that someone to be her. The irony was that Captain Alara Mendez had more real-world coordination hours logged than most of the men in that room had combat time in the last 5 years. She'd led a 3-week aerial maneuver in the frozen steppe zones, planned field triage routes for earthquake response units, and rewritten the Southern Corridor's drone interaction manual. When civilian casualties started climbing, quietly, without ceremony, always in someone else's name, at 28, she wasn't new to service, just new to visibility. And that was the problem. The military still held to quiet traditions, respect earned through age, or wounds or time served in the old way. There was honor in that. Alara never resented it. But she knew how rooms like this one worked. She'd seen the look before. Major Halloran, eyes half-lidded, leaned back in his seat. "Hope the coffee's fresh today," he murmured when she entered. Someone chuckled. She didn't respond, because Alara knew what was coming. The real test wasn't her title. It was how she'd hold it when the doubting started. The senior officer running the session, Colonel Tiernan, tapped his pen on the table. He was sharp-eyed, neutral-faced, a man who respected performance more than persona. "Captain Mendez will be leading today's briefing," he said, glancing across the room. "She's been tasked by Joint Command with restructuring the terrain-based ops calendar. Listen close." The reaction was subtle. A raised eyebrow here, a disbelieving glance there. Alara stepped forward with her folder, no hesitation, but no arrogance either. Just the quiet confidence of someone who'd run simulations in her sleep, logged errors down to the second, and seen what happened when those seconds turned into lost lives. She spoke clearly, pointing to the projected field map, 3 errors in current patrol protocol. She began. 1. Route memory overlap is causing units to double back over terrain recently passed, wasting time and increasing exposure. 2. Drone relays are being prioritized over human extraction points. That's backwards. We're losing signal, precision, and morale. 3. Supply deliveries are being treated like peacetime convoys. That's getting people killed. The room quieted, not out of respect yet, out of surprise. She flipped a page. "I've rewritten the regional pulse schedule, integrated terrain latency analysis and soldier fatigue modeling. The result, 38% faster handoffs, 22% lower exposure during peak risk windows, and if implemented estimated 6 fewer casualties per month based on the last 3 quarters. Major Halloran cleared his throat. "So, you're saying our system is broken, and you just fixed it on paper?" Alara didn't flinch. "I'm saying your system was built for a terrain that no longer exists." Tiernan looked up. "Elaborate." She clicked to the next slide. After last season's floods, the river basins shifted. Drone relays kept mapping the old terrain model, but field units followed what they saw, which meant soldiers were fighting in paths command didn't. No had changed. The system was broken. I didn't fix it. I just updated it. That was the moment the room shifted, not dramatically, but enough. Someone scribbled a note. Someone else leaned forward. Halloran said nothing more. And Tiernan, the colonel, who had seen too many men speak too fast, just nodded. Continue. That's how she entered, not through a title, but through function. Back at her quarters that night, Alara reviewed comms logs, field surveys, and troop feedback. Her inbox had already started shifting. A request from one unit for early training access. A note from a lieutenant asking if she'd review his region's supply rhythm. No congratulations. Just respect, beginning to take shape. She closed her laptop, leaned back in her chair, and exhaled. Respect was never the goal, but readiness, that always was. Alara's changes went into effect within 48 hours. That alone stirred discomfort. Military operations were used to lag time briefings followed by weeks of delay. Red tape staggered. Approvals. But her plan was so precise, so deeply rooted in live data and field input. That central command approved it almost immediately. She didn't announce it, but the soldiers noticed. Within 2 days, patrols moved faster. Drone flights aligned with visual needs. Supply drops hit closer to actual coordinates. And most of all, no one had to double back over dead terrain. The effect was quiet, but undeniable. For those on the ground, it meant one thing: fewer mistakes, fewer risks. But for some officers above ground, it meant something else entirely. It meant accountability, and not everyone welcomed it. Major Halloran, who had spent the last 6 months crafting the previous terrain doctrine, was one of the first to push back. He didn't contest the results, he couldn't, but he began to question the process. She acted too quickly, he said in a follow-up meeting with Tiernan. No officer should restructure regional movement schedules without input from senior field staff. She had field data from 6 bases, Tiernan replied. She didn't request clearance for historical overlays. Tiernan leaned back. Because the overlays were outdated. Halloran pressed on. Sir, with respect, we're setting a precedent. If junior officers can override veteran protocols because they found a better way, we're not just improving, we're eroding command trust. Tiernan didn't respond immediately, because this was the real tension, not whether Alara was right, but whether the system was ready to accept her being right. And it wasn't just Halloran. Other officers, those who had once smirked at her presence, now fell quiet around her. Not out of respect, out of caution. Her name carried weight now, but not warmth. They called her Captain Fix-It behind her back, not with admiration, with resentment. Mid-roll monetization marker number 1 fits here after Alara's improvements take effect, but before the institutional pushback turns personal. The tension hooks viewers. Will she be silenced despite her success? The quiet war has just begun. The next friction point came during a closed-door review of Alara's logistics algorithm. She wasn't invited, but she found out through the training staff her framework had been flagged for review of origin. Authenticity. When she asked for clarification, the response was careful. There's concern that some of your tactical models may have borrowed from foreign protocol databases. It was a serious charge. Alara stared at the officer delivering it. Are you accusing me of plagiarism? We're requesting verification, nothing more. But she knew. This wasn't about the model. It was about the challenge her model had introduced, namely, that someone outside the old guard had built something better, faster, and without permission. Alara could have pushed back publicly, filed a protest. Instead, she printed every audit report, logged every step of her framework design, compiled a timeline, including timestamps, memos, and field inputs, then submitted it all, silently. No defense speech, no outrage, just facts. Because Alara had no interest in defeating her critics, only in outlasting them, the audit cleared. Her name, in fact, it went further. The review board's final note read, "Model structure demonstrates independent innovation, highly efficient use of field algorithms, and adherence to all internal development protocols. Framework to be standardized for cross-regional testing. No apology followed. No one admitted they'd filed the complaint. But the result was clear. Her system wasn't just allowed. It was now recommended, and that stung more than any reprimand would have. Back in her quarters, Alara sat in the dark for a long time. Not angry, just tired. Tired of proving what should have been evident. Tired of waiting for merit to be enough. Tired of holding her breath in rooms full of men who never had to explain how they got there. She opened her field log and wrote a single line. They trust what they recognize, and I am not what they recognize. Then she closed the book and got ready for morning briefing, because the mission hadn't changed, even if the people had. But the backlash found a new form. Her next scheduled session, meant to train younger officers in implementing her protocol, was quietly reassigned to Halloran's assistant. No explanation, just a canceled calendar invite. Alara didn't object. She just requested a seat at the session. The room was stiff when she entered. The assistant fumbled through half the presentation, misreading timing sequences, skipping drone to field latency windows, and leaving half the room confused. At the end, someone raised their hand. Did Captain Mendez design this system? The assistant hesitated. She contributed to its framework. Alara stood. I wrote it. Everyone turned. I'm here to help, not to be credited. If anyone has questions, I'll be in the sim room. Then she left, no anger, just clarity, and half the room followed. Her mid-roll monetization marker number to fits here after the failed presentation, and Alara's quiet reclaiming of leadership. It's a pivotal shift, showing the start of loyalty built not through authority, but through trust. Over the next weeks, something began to shift at ground level. Lieutenants began requesting her by name. Medics asked if she'd review supply loadouts. Even drone operators she'd never met sent her pulse time logs asking for review. Word spread not through titles, but through results. Her model kept saving time and lives. And eventually, quietly, Colonel Tiernan approached her. You've been offered reassignment, he said. Joint Ops, West Corridor, elevated clearance. Alara looked up. They finally want me on their side. Tiernan didn't smile, but his voice softened. They want you to do what you've already done, just with a better room. She nodded. Who takes my place here? You'll choose. That night, she opened her notebook again. Wrote, respect that must be demanded is fragile. Respect that arrives late but stays is earned. Then she packed. No ceremony. No farewell dinner. Just a desk cleared by dawn, and a door opened into the next room that finally fit. Not because she'd forced it, but because she'd proven it belonged to her. The reassignment orders had been signed. Alara was already briefing her replacement when the call came in. A distress alert coded high priority, Outpost Kilo 7. A small team on a reconnaissance mission had gone dark. Last contact placed them in terrain with poor satellite visibility and weather closing in. Standard protocol required escalation through Central Ops, but Central was hours away, and visibility would collapse before then. Someone needed to act. Immediately, Alara stood in the doorway of the logistics bay, her name no longer on the daily board. She turned to Lieutenant Reza, her soon-to-be replacement. Can you authorize a scramble? He hesitated. Only Joint Ops can override right now. Then don't override. She stepped back inside, picked up the headset. Just patch me through to Vantage Base and let them think I still run this floor. Reza paused, then nodded. Sometimes. Respect doesn't wait for permission. By the time the rescue squad launched, the window had already begun to close. Alara entered the forward sim room and manually mapped predicted movement patterns based on terrain, fatigue rate, wind path, and known rations. It was meticulous, risky, but precise, just like her. And when the team reached the ravine exactly where she'd marked, they found them. All four, alive, cold, but breathing. The story could have ended there, but it didn't, because one of the rescued officers had a body cam, and when that footage reached Joint Ops, it revealed something unexpected, that not just Alara's instructions, but her presence on the headset, calmly guiding the squad leader, correcting GPS drift, and anticipating line-of-sight interference minutes before it struck. She had coordinated the entire operation while no longer in command. She had no official clearance. She had nothing to gain, and yet she acted. With clarity, with courage, with care. The footage reached General Marek, the man Hood once told Tiernan, "We need more experience in this role." He watched in silence, rewound one segment, watched again, then said nothing. But the next day, he issued a directive. Effective immediately, Captain Alara Mendez is promoted to Major, full operational command of Interlink Tactical Group 5. It stunned the board, not because she wasn't deserving, but because it broke pattern. Her promotion skipped an entire tier. It was unheard of, and yet no one argued, because the footage had done what 1,000 performance reviews couldn't. It showed who she was when no one was watching. The twist, however, ran deeper. It wasn't just the footage, it was what Marek saw in it. An old face, someone he hadn't seen in years. Alara Mendez was not just a rising officer. She was the daughter of Major Sofia Mendez, a tactical genius who had once pulled Marek's own team from a border ambush years ago, using nothing but radio intercepts and a pencil-drawn map on the floor of a makeshift command tent. She had died in the field, unheralded, forgotten by most, but not by Marek. And now, watching Alara work her tone, her timing, her unshakable clarity, he realized this is where it came from. Not nepotism, but legacy, earned in silence, passed not through fame but through instinct, discipline, resolve. He picked up a pen, signed the promotion letter himself, then wrote a private note in the margin. Like your mother, you move before the system allows it. That's what makes you necessary. Back at her station, Alara didn't smile when the news arrived. She didn't cry. She simply nodded once and returned to the map, because there were still missions, still teams, still risks that required more than authority, they required presence. But later that evening, when the floor was empty, she took out her notebook, wrote, "They heard my name, but now they've listened." The final twist. The respect she now held wasn't built on her rank. It wasn't because she became Major Mendez. It was because, when no one expected it, when no one required it, she acted with quiet leadership, guided without force, delivered without fanfare. And that kind of power, it doesn't echo, it resonates. The next morning, her name was etched into the daily board again, only this time, not under operations assistant. It stood alone under the word commander. No applause followed, no ceremonial announcement, just a few lifted heads, a few silent nods, and in some cases, averted eyes, because those who had laughed now understood she'd always been leading. They'd just never looked closely enough. She moved through the command center with the same calm pace. Nothing about her posture changed. She didn't gloat. She didn't correct the past. She just showed up again, as she always had, only now they followed. Lieutenant Reza stepped into her office that afternoon, a soft knock before entering. He carried a folder, another late-night incident needing her sign-off. She flipped through it quickly, then looked up. "You did well yesterday. You didn't hesitate when it counted." He hesitated at her praise. "You didn't either. I didn't know you could act without clearance." "You're not supposed to," she said, then closed the file. "But not acting would have cost lives." He nodded, then paused. "Can I ask something?" "Of course. Why didn't you tell anyone who your mother was?" Alara didn't look up for a moment. Then, "Because her name wasn't the reason I belonged here. I needed to know that I belonged, not because of her, but because I showed up for the right reasons. She would have been proud." "I hope so," she whispered, "but that's not why I did it." Later that week, General Marek visited the floor unannounced. The room stood straighter when he entered, but instead of a speech, he walked straight to Alara's desk and handed her a small box. Inside was a silver emblem, rare, reserved only for those whose field performance shaped tactical doctrine. "I've only given out 3 of these in 30 years, he said quietly. "But this one, I was holding on to, waiting for someone who moved without needing credit." Alara nodded, touched it once, and replied simply, "Thank you, sir." As he turned to leave, he paused at the doorway and added, "Your mother would have decked me for waiting this long." That made her smile, the first real one. The respect didn't come all at once. Some officers still struggled with it out of habit, or ego, or simply shame. But over time, things changed, not because she demanded it, but because she lived it. She stayed late to review failed ops. She stepped aside when others had better data. She asked questions instead of issuing orders. And when mistakes happened, she took the blame quietly, without fanfare, then helped fix them without punishing shame. In doing so, she built something bigger than rank. She built trust. Months later, during an international joint drill, an allied commander misread her rank insignia. He approached her with a patronizing smile. "Excuse me, miss. I think you're in the wrong sector." Before she could reply, Reza stepped forward. "You're speaking to Major Alara Mendez, Interlink Command. She runs this sector." The man blinked. Reza added softly, "She's not in the wrong place. She's why this place works." No. Further correction was needed. The mission logs would show her efficiency. The awards would cite her accuracy and strategy. But what mattered most wasn't what made it onto paper. It was the shift in the room when she entered. It was the way junior cadets sought her guidance, not because she had power, but because she had presence. It was the whispered conversations that began with, "Watch how she handles this, just watch." It was legacy, not inherited, built. One evening, alone in her quarters, she pulled out an old photo, faded, torn at the corners. Her mother, in field gear, standing in front of a radio station, surrounded by dust and chaos but smiling like nothing could shake her. On the back, in rough handwriting, was a single line: "Lead with sense. Stay small where others get loud." Alara traced the words with her thumb, then placed the photo back in the drawer. Tomorrow, another operation. Tomorrow, more decisions, maps, and moving parts. But tonight, just this: a young woman once dismissed, now trusted to lead, and still quiet, but no longer overlooked. Not all strength shouts. Some strength waits, quietly, until it's needed, and then it acts without asking for permission. Alara's story is not just about earning a title. It's about showing up when no one believes in you, and choosing dignity over anger, precision over pride. She proved that leadership isn't about age or appearance, it's about who still moves forward when recognition is delayed. In a world quick to judge, may we look again before we dismiss someone. If Alara's quiet strength reminded you of someone or something inside yourself, share that with us. Comment below with one word that captures this story for you. Maybe it's word, maybe it's earned, maybe it's seen. Whatever it is, let it be a reminder: respect begins the moment we choose to truly look. And sometimes, the quietest voice in the room is already leading.